Welcome to Brands on Tap, the podcast where we discuss all things brand related.
So whether you're a business owner, industry expert, or simply interested, this podcast is for you.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Brands on Tap. And today's episode, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of different web platforms, okay, and all the nuances regarding those.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So today we're talking about web platforms, and you might be thinking, what is a web platform? Well, it's essentially somewhere that you go online to build your website. So that could be, a platform that we would use, or technically more coined a framework, I suppose, but something like WordPress would be one of a great example of one that's quite flexible and open source, probably one of the only ones I can think of actually that is open source. And then you've got more paid for platforms. Or
what does open source mean then?
So it's a good question. Open source so essentially means that you're not tied into having to pay somebody or a company royalties to use their system. There's no fees attributed to it, and you own the code and the website itself. So from our point of view, that's a huge advantage. And obviously, as you can tell, we'll be slightly biased towards WordPress throughout the web platforms, but there is good reason for that, and it's something that we've always used from the get-go. So essentially a lot of the other platforms out there will be fees attributed to them, there'll be limitations, risks, so it really just depends on kind of what the need is for your business, and obviously each platform is going to have been marketed to different companies, different businesses alike, so there'll be different tiers of platforms that we'll be talking about. So obviously some of them, like we've explained, WordPress is quite a broad platform. It's quite accessible. People can use it, people can pick it up, and you can do some quite simple things with it. But obviously there are the other spectrum of it. There are a lot of things that you can do with WordPress. There's a huge plugin database, and what plugin would refer to is if you need some functionality in your site, and you don't want to pay a developer to do it, and it's a huge cost with it, then WordPress opens the doors to plugins, so you can go in, you can use their whole library of plugins, and basically.
So wasn't WordPress built predominantly in the beginning on a blogging platform?
That's correct. Yeah, it was, and a lot of clients still come to us. Less so nowadays, but they did probably 5-10 years ago. Every conversation was, isn't WordPress just a blogging platform? And I think there was that connotation of naivety and not understanding the fact that it has grown exponentially since its fruition. And today it's a very well-known platform. It's responsible for a huge majority of the web's websites, driving websites. So it's a very popular platform, and it's largely down to the fact it's open source. It's people don't want that ability to think, oh, what if someone puts the price up, or what if I want to take my website away and I can't? And I think that's just a fear that people have in their mind, and where the other platforms excel is marketing. So they'll market themselves to a certain type of business and hope the naivety of the fact they're not worried about mentioning what happens when you leave us, or what happens to your code, or who owns it. They're just selling the benefits. So
well, that's the trouble, isn't it? I mean, from a business perspective, you don't know, like you say, with a marketing perspective, with the likes of Wix and even Shopify, those kind of systems, they don't tell you that you're kind of locked into their system.
Absolutely.
So if you need to move your website at a later date, or give it to another, God forbid you ever leave an agency such as us, and you move it to somebody else, they're going to go, hold on a minute, we can't port this across. It's far more difficult. You don't own it either.
No.
So there's definitely some issues surrounding it.
Yeah, I think that's a good kind of overview synopsis of where the differences lie. We'll go into some of the more specific ones later in the podcast, but we're not here to kind of list them all off. There's quite a few similarities between a lot of them anyway, but I'd say the main divide would be between the ones that are paid for, and they have a very limited purpose. Like Paul said with Shopify, its purpose is an online shop, which is great for if you've got your objectives in mind, you've got a design that's relatively simple, and you just want to throw a shop up. The whole platform's been built to do that. But if, say, you've got a client that's got a bit more of a creative idea, they need some bespoke booking system, or they need something that's very custom to them, to their needs.
Yep.
Even a booking system, it's not a one size fits all. You've got certain clients that we just got 10 slots a day, we need to fill them. That's relatively simple. But you've got another client that says, actually, we offer tours, and there's a capacity for those tours, and there's criteria for them. There's different things that we need to bear in mind for each tour. If, groups of 5 book, what happens? Once you start getting more complicated, then obviously a kind of one size fits all system like Shopify becomes more costly. You need to look into apps. You need to build customization for it, and it gets, suddenly that sales price of we only charge X amount a month is just a farce, because you've added all your apps on it, you've added all your exponential costs on it. It's become a big fee, and as we've said before, there's tiering to them as well, which is a real issue. So they start off quite cheap. Once you become successful, your shop is entitled to pay much more for that web platform.
And it can be from nothing at the beginning up to £200 plus per month.
£200 plus per month. I mean, Shopify, you can go up to £2,000.
Wow.
Their plus plan. You've got a business that's thinking we can trust this system. Suddenly, they've not costed in the fact that what's costing them a few hundred a month suddenly then costs them a few grand a month. So that exponential growth of businesses. Some businesses will think, we've got this Shopify system for good, or, Wix, or whatever system you're on. Squarespace is out there as well. But what they're not considering is once they get past a certain threshold, that product essentially is what it is. It's software that's been built and sold to somebody. Yeah. That product then expects also to be rewarded for that, and they'll add more interest. The percentages will go up per sale, and usually they'll add more fee per month. So you've got to cost that in realistically and be practical about what that system's doing for your business.
Yep.
And I think that's where the differences lie. Again, okay, WordPress isn't free. You still need an agency to maintain it. You're going to have to put an e-commerce system on it. The e-commerce system, if you want it to be complicated, you're going to have to still build functionality, still apps. But again, the main difference is that's still your property. That's your website. You own that. You've built that app. It's yours. You customize it, it's yours. There's a lot of flexibility with that, but there's much less flexibility. I think that's the key difference. Is the flexibility of the platforms.
Yeah. And they use a content management system as well, don't they?
Yes.
WordPress. Plus the others do as well.
Correct.
So content management system, you might hear the term CMS.
Yeah.
So that's what it stands for. So basically it means that the back end, you can load in images, logos, or your text, and it pulls that information into certain pages.
That's right.
In essence, one of the benefits that we found, obviously, with a lot of our clients on the WordPress platform, is that a lot of our clients are familiar with using WordPress.
That's true.
So that's also something to bear in mind when you're trying to create a new website. Is the person is actually going to input all the data,
100%.
all the text, all the images, and update it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Are they competent and used to using that platform? And that's where we find that a lot of people, well, especially a lot of our clients, are very familiar with WordPress.
It's a very good point.
That's a huge benefit.
It's a very good point, yeah.
So the other thing I was going to say is that obviously when you're in the initial stages of deciding what to choose as your web platform, then you can always talk to an agency such as ours anyway, and we'll advise you the best routes, not just for the quick fix in the short term, but very much for the long term. And, what are your aims for your business? Are you looking to grow it exponentially year on year? And then we can then ascertain and tell you that, say, like you mentioned about Shopify, potentially it could end up costing you far more than having an initial build, say, on a WordPress platform with, say, WooCommerce or something bolted onto it. So we can advise whether that is a good route for you or not.
Yeah.
How cost effective that is, because it might be better that you do use an agency such as ours, especially for the medium to long term.
Mm-hmm.
So don't always think about the initial short-term fix. I need a website. Think about the long term and where it needs to go, how you're going to grow your business, and what that website needs to do to achieve what you need in terms of your business
100%.
goals, really.
100%. Yeah. I think it's the same kind of pattern and strategy we employ with most things we do these days. It's just having that sit down chat and basically saying to the client, the business, whatever the product is, it's not, the platform shouldn't be the deciding factor of whether you've got enough budget to build X, Y, and Z, or I don't have enough budget to throw at paying an agency to build a WordPress system. It's, you've quoted me, say 10, 12 grand plus for quite a simple website. But once you start unpacking where that, what's involved for that, you've got in there, you've got content, imagery, strategy, structure, product installation, photography of the products, putting prices in, functionality, checking checkout systems, copywriting. As soon as you've broken all those stages down, suddenly that 12 grand, a lot of those processes still need to take place, whatever platform you use. Yeah. So you're not saving loads of money by doing things yourself and using a platform that's, designed to be marketed to the end user, or Joe Blogs that can kind of save a bit of money, because in the long term, it reflects badly on your product, on your business and everything else. So I think that's the key thing. And like you've said, Paul, it's making sure that the platform is the right decision for where you're at and not the other way around. Not using the platform and saying, right, how can I make this work for me? And obviously, while we're on the subject of platforms, that there's a kind of categories of them out there. So you've got the WordPress that we mentioned. You've got e-commerce platforms out there, which is solely based on e-commerce, of which there's a whole wealth now. Shopify is one of the most popular. You've got things like Big Commerce. You've got Square Commerce. There's so many to name. They're all relatively similar, but Shopify, I would say, marketing wise and development wise, is probably one of the top of its game. It's on top of.
And we've got clients that integrate Shopify and the sort of sales end of it into their stores or their restaurants or whatever, into their vineyards for some of our clients. So that integration into their back end systems, their sales side of things, for the retail element. That's where Shopify, I think, does do a really good job.
You hit the nail on the head there, I think, because with the example of the vineyards, obviously Shopify did a sales promotion where they reached out to a lot of businesses quite regularly in the UK, and one of their real USPs, which is, I can see the advantage of it, is they get the point of sale in with the business, which makes sense. So they've got the actual structure, they give them fancy touch screens, and again, it's not just Shopify, other businesses do it as well. I'm just using them as an example. We've seen it in a numerous kind of amount of times with clients now. So, and then they say to the client, right, now you've got a point of sale working, that's ticking over, you've got all the infrastructure in here, nice touch screens, all your inventory's in there. Why not just put it online? All the inventory's there, the sales, your prices are all there, your infrastructure's here.
We've got you on the hook.
Exactly, yeah. So it's I don't want to refer to Apple again, but it's that kind of logic of like, well, actually, it's much easier to use our online system.
That's it. They built an ecosystem, really, haven't they?
They have.
I mean, from end to end.
Yeah.
That's where Shopify is good, actually, to be fair.
Agree.
But then you are locked into their system.
You are. And and obviously, as we've seen with other clients, it works for a year, 2 years, and then they suddenly start seeing other systems out there that are a bit more flexible. They, the pricing tiers are different for them. The percentage cuts for each sale is different. So suddenly they start seeing all these other things and start thinking, actually, what about if we use another system out there, another web builder, web platform, but we've got all these hurdles to jump over, to actually get to where we want to be now, because we're so in bed with Shopify, or Squarespace is a similar system, as I said, Square Up, Big Commerce, they're all.
Do Wix have one or not?
Wix do have an e-commerce department, and they've pushed their platform into a more kind of elite section as well, which they've called Editor X or something, which again is so confusing, because essentially they're saying this product is for the masses, and now they've backed up a bit and realized, but actually serious developers are boycotting our platform and they're not using Wix, and they're seeing Wix as a cheap system, so let's rebrand it and let's make Editor X. So now we've got this super elite version of Wix.
But they're still advertising Wix, though.
They're still advertising as Wix for consumers. But then if you're the consumer that wants a bit more, or you're looking at Wix to do a bit more of a serious web project, they're now trying to kind of kibosh anyone shooting it down by using this Editor X system, which again is kind of like, if you were a serious developer, I'm not sure why you
me, you mean?
Like you, exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure why you look at Editor X for that use case. So it's it's an interesting one. I can see in time they might get that interest there. They might build that following, but it's almost like it's a panic response from the branding being way off where they wanted it to be, and they've got enough budget to just say, look, let's just cover all bases. But I can't fully understand personally, and I've spoken to a lot of developers in the industry about that, why Editor X would be a choice that they go down when they can already code and develop and build sites themselves. You know, they would just do that on a system that they can do that on.
And not locked in.
And exactly that's the caveat, is as good as the system is, you're still then locked into their ecosystem. And obviously it's worth saying at this point, there are tools out there, you can transfer between systems. You're not, if you used one.
Yeah, we've done it, haven't we, for clients?
We have. Yeah, it's just the difficulty of if there's nuances of how Shopify manages things, products, SKUs, categories. Shopify does everything in collections, which is a very Shopify based thing. Most websites would use categories or sort of grouping logic for things, for products, pages. Shopify decides to do it in collections, which works for Shopify. But when you then move it off to another system, again, you've got all these little nuances in there that just don't tally up.
Useful.
Yeah, and it's all the time and effort to do all that, and then you've got to pay somebody to move it off. Someone has to redesign your website, rebuild the website. It's a costly experience. Compared to, say, if it was in the WordPress environment to begin with, and you wanted to adapt it, it's far more flexible to do that. So I think that's we've dealt and covered a lot with e-commerce, but I think there's also systems out there that are aimed more at graphic designers as well. So you've got things like Framer. You've got Webflow, which I've got a lot of time for. They've tried to educate people into how to do things properly.
Yeah, it looks a good system.
So I think they've done a good amount of kind of work and effort to try and say it's not just a marketing system. We also want to educate people on how to use it. So I think there's elements of that there, but obviously what comes with simplicity and ease of use, there are negatives in terms of the code quality. The code quality of Webflow is still a bit questionable. It's never going to be as clean or as good.
When you say code quality, then do you mean like if the code quality is bad, your site could break, or is it more like there's a lot of code on the website, in which case it could slow the website down? Yeah,
good question. I'd probably say both, actually.
Okay.
So, yeah, as a consumer, you want, naively, you wouldn't necessarily understand what's going on in the site, but you want the code to be as clean as possible. So much like, a Word document that you go in that someone sent you, if you go in and there's loads of styling everywhere, there's formatting, people have messed with the margins, they've added boxes to things, suddenly you've got a lot of complication.
And we love Word, don't we?
We absolutely love Word, it's one of our top design tools for sure. And we've been there ourselves, and then there's all this formatting to undo. You've got to take boxes off things, you've got to move the margins back, you've got to reformat the document, and actually all that is a letter. And you could set up a new document as a letter. You've got the main address at the top. You've got who the letter's for. You've got the sub footer and maybe a logo. That's as simple as that letter needs to be. But the document we were sent is very complicated. It's been messed around with. People have jumped in. They formatted it to hell. So I think that's the difference. But if you liken that to, say, how a website would be, if it's as clean as possible and the code is as simple as possible, then yes, Google's going to see everything much clearer. Bing's going to see everything much clearer. Whatever the search engine is, it's going to digest that content far clearer. And as the user that's updating that site, it's easier for them. They know, well, there's only a couple of elements on this page. There's an image where it should be. There's some text where it should be. I can update that very easily. Contrast that with the site that's very complicated, very bloated. The code's everywhere. Then you're basically doing something in the back end. So let's take Framer, for example, or Webflow. You're making something look fancy and design it nice in the back end, but then what's coming through on the front end is a different representation of what you've input. I think that's it's twofold. It's confusing for the user and it's just bloated. It doesn't need to be like that. And I think there's always going to be that bloat with a tool that's trying to help you, because you're not doing it manually. So where was I? If as a client, obviously we try to build. Well, we don't try. We do build all our websites so that the updatable elements and the bits that we feel and the client feels they're comfortable to update are as easy as possible to do so. And if you change a title, you change text, you change an image, you know what you're getting and you know what you're doing. And I think that's the benefit of having somebody that's aware of the technology that you're using. So they've built it to be, as easy for you to update as possible with that in mind throughout the whole process. Whereas these other tools out there, it's very easy to drift and try and explore and play with new technology there, new templates, open up the doors to what it offers without really understanding how a website works, how a website should be structured, the semantic code, which can then have real knock-on effects to your SEO and the quality of the site, loading speeds. It's where that line becomes grey for some of these tools, is they're trying to handhold that person and saying, we can help you build a website. But ultimately, where's the line between, actually, I don't know anything about a website, why am I trying to build one? And I think where the knowledge crosses over with the efficiency of the tool, that's a concerning area, certainly for us as professionals.
It is.
We have to be aware that, when we're advising a client, we're very transparent about that, I think.
Yeah, the other thing to add to that is, obviously, we build websites where, we have a conversation with a client about what they want to update, how frequently they want to update it, and also who's going to be updating it.
Yes.
So, there are people within organizations that are probably more competent than others.
Absolutely.
So, and we've got some clients that, they really don't, all they want to do is maybe update a news article, let's say. So create a new news article, add in an image, put some text in, that's it. So, and what we can do, the way we kind of structure the sites, is the reason why we have these conversations with our clients, is so that we can lock down as much as we feel necessary for that client. So they can't go into certain pages and basically, ruin the site, crash the site, duplicate pages, delete pages, things like that. So the ones, obviously, the clients that we've got that are very, very competent on WordPress, then we can open it up as much as possible. But for the ones that, really, we have the conversations with, and they say to us, look, all I want to do is do this. Then we can lock down all the other elements.
Absolutely.
So they don't have the fear then that they're going to mess something up as well, because there is definitely anxiety with changing elements on a website. What happens if I do this? Will the whole site crash? Potentially, yes, it could. So, I mean, we have backups and things like that, so we can pull a backup from the day before, or earlier that day, maybe sometimes.
That's a good point, actually, because with web systems, again, it's going to be on the user of the web system. If they don't have an agency backing them up and they've gone directly to the web system itself and they've bought into it, they're going to be reliant on the support from that system as well. So there is a topic of support to be mentioned within the platforms and systems available out there, because, like Paul's just said, for local clients or clients that we work with, even nationally, they can just pick up the phone, have a chat with us, drop us an email, and 9 times out of 10 it can be sorted, there and then, or if not, within a day or two.
Don't they need to raise a ticket with us, and then we get back to them in about 3 weeks?
Yeah, exactly that. So that's the contrast to raising a ticket. And again, if you're paying premium prices on Shopify, then yes, your ticket, I mean, I would absolutely kick off if it wasn't, but your ticket should be addressed within a matter of 24 hours. But you're still having to deal with someone you've never met. You don't know whether they understand the background of your site. You don't know if they've seen your site before. Chances are they won't have. So they're going to have to there's a human on the end of the ticket. They're still going to have to go in and explore what's happened to the site. Why has this happened? What's caused this? And again, if you're using things like extensions and apps in Shopify, that's a whole different developer that's involved. So they're going to have to then say, look, you need to reach out to this app you're using. We can't help you. That's another day, 2 days, 3 days. It's not a resolution that can necessarily be predicted to happen in a certain amount of time, unfortunately. And someone needs to manage it, which is the key point. I think you touched on, Paul, with in-house teams. We need to build the site to reflect the in-house team. And some people have more competence and more comfortable than others. And if we've got a client that's saying, look, I'm very anxious, I'm not very comfortable with what I need, but I need to update my products, I need to add new products in, put the prices in, the rest of the site needs to just run itself, then we will make that as dynamic as possible, which again, some of these other systems, you need to really know how things work to make that happen. And that client can then just peacefully go in and manage the bits they're comfortable with, knowing the site's updating itself.
And the other benefit of using an agency as opposed to using some of these other systems is that we can tailor. I mean, sometimes we create videos for a client, for instance, and to show them exactly how to change bits of their website that are relevant to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, if you're using some of these other systems, yes, there's loads of online videos, but will it be a video that's pertinent to your business? Probably not.
Quite.
So, we can create videos. We can even, do Teams calls and things.
Yeah,
and
that's
and
it, isn't
talk
it?
clients through how we're doing things.
Hand-holding, yeah.
Or even, we've had clients come in and we've, trained
Yeah.
them how to use their website.
Yeah.
Or gone on site to show them how to use their website.
Absolutely.
So, that hands-on approach and that tailored approach you won't get from using
No, you won't. It's a good point.
system like Wix or...
It's a good point. Yeah. And again, unless you're paying big money with Shopify, but again, it's the lack of personality is still going to be there. And I honestly don't think the majority of people you contact on Shopify, certainly for the first few times, unless you get assigned a manager on there, and I keep using Shopify as an example, but it's purely because I know it well and it's one of the biggest systems.
Yeah.
The logic would apply to the majority of other systems out there. There's no difference between any of the ones I've used.
Yep.
Webflow, Framer, BigCommerce I've used before, Squarespace I've used. The support systems are very much the same. They'll use a ticketing based system like Zendesk or Jira or something similar to that, and they'll have to go through and respond to them in sequential order. That's the only way you can look after clients.
Yep.
And obviously there's going to be a lack of personality, like you've said, Paul. And you've got to weigh up, over the course of a year, 2 years, if that person that's in-house is having to jump through, or as I've said earlier, over hurdles. I don't know why I'm jumping through hurdles.
Hoops, maybe?
Jumping through hoops, I think that's probably what's going on there. So if that person has to do that repetitively each time they hit a problem, then if you top their time up over the year, it's the efficiency again that we talked about before, being comfortable. And sometimes we come across quite precious to a client to say, well, we don't want you updating this, we don't want you updating that. And actually where it's coming from is a position of experience where a client has made the site collapse. There's a professional element to the branding that we need to maintain, the flow, the website, and if that is unlocked to somebody that's inexperienced, it would be like me kind of going and dabbling with an electrician's setup in my house that they've done, and it's meticulous, and I'm going and fiddling around with wires going, I know a bit about this and a bit about that. It's what we said earlier, is where's the line between actually I shouldn't be doing this isn't my area of expertise. And I think that's where it crosses over with the web platform's argument, is do you know anything about SEO? Because if you don't, the web platform's not going to do it for you.
Explain what SEO is.
So SEO we touched on in a previous podcast a few times, but it's search engine optimization. So it's how optimized is your website for people looking for what you do, basically. And
so how easily it can be found on Google or search engines.
Exactly that. Google, Bing, whatever you're using, ChatGPT, any kind of algorithm that could present your content as an advantageous result to somebody. But obviously there's so many things out there that will help you with it, and I can't deny that obviously it hasn't come on leaps and bounds. There's AI tools out there. You can do a lot of stuff online with these tools. You can, a lot of these systems are built into AI. So Shopify's got AI built in, Squarespace got AI built in. But again, what it isn't doing is replacing your knowledge. So if you don't really know what you're trying to do, if you've got no strategy to your SEO and you've got no awareness of what that AI is trying to achieve, you're still just kind of throwing shapes in the wind, essentially. You're just going, well, I'll put this page up and I'll put that page up, but it's not replacing somebody that's actually aware of what that objective needs to be. And I think that's where we would come in and say, look, we don't want you editing this template for the following reasons. It will jeopardize your SEO. And if the client still comes back and says, look, I don't care about SEO, well, then that would be a first. But then obviously we wouldn't put our foot down and say you cannot update your website. But what we're trying to do is just protect them in the best way possible.
Well, that's it. I think it's like, you touched on the word brand. There's also, making sure that your website is on brand. These AI systems even bolted into some of these platforms, like you said, with Wix and the like. You can use AI agents to write content for you and things like that. Great. But is the tone of voice right? Is the messaging right? Even some of the images now obviously can be created using AI, but is the image style on brand?
Correct.
That whole brand look and feel still needs to look as though it's part of your business.
It does.
So, and this goes on to a lot of these systems as well use templates. So even the page structure and the way that a page looks aesthetically can look the same as 10 other sites, hundreds, thousands of other sites.
Yeah.
And it's not unique to your business. And I think that's the other thing that holistically that we'll look at from a top tier down brand perspective. You know, we look at things like tone of voice, the messaging, how the page is structured, the user experience, the user interface, the image style. All of those elements need to be basically pulled together and make sure that your site is on brand and is unique.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise you can use a templated system, pull pages in, use AI, and yes, you'll end up with a pretty looking website.
You will.
But is it working hard, and is it in tune with the rest of your business?
No,
it's not.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think that's what people forget sometimes. And for me, that's the main negative, I suppose, to web platforms. It's not so much the platform itself, it's what it's trying to do. And certain platforms out there, I mean, we encounter one regularly, say with the WordPress system, which is built into the WordPress system, called Elementor, which is essentially a framework for WordPress. So it is essentially it's a platform because it's marketed to people that are non-professionals, to be honest. And now it's started to try and market itself to web agencies, web designers. But much like my argument earlier with Wix of the Editor X, for me, it's a bit like, why are you marketing a tool that's trying to replace and help people that can't do something to an agency or a person that should know how to do that? It's a very difficult and strange technique. Because again, it would be like saying, you know, well, you're a painter, why don't you have a go at some electrics? And it's not their bag, it's not what they do. But
give it a go.
You could give it a go and short yourself out.
House, but...
Yeah, well, people do, unfortunately, don't they? They do have a go at other things, and I think that is true. But it's the reason they'd answer and say, you know, I know that, but there's also people out there that I can help with my experience of painting, and I want to focus on them. There'll be other people that say, oh, actually, I'll have a go at it. And what you'll get is someone that doesn't really know what they're doing. They'll do a half-assed job of the electrics, and they'll have had some tools, they'll know some training, but it's not really their area of experience. And I think for me, that's the dilemma with some of these tools. It's kind of deducing who they're marketed for. Because like I say, the whole point of WordPress is you kind of understand what you're doing with it. You know the objectives. Like you said, Paul, you've got the structure there. You know branding. You know design. That doesn't mean the website has to be, every single page has to be radically different in look and feel. Because again, clients that don't understand principles of design would do that. They'd make every page has to look different. No, actually, consistency is a good thing in design. So having that, you know, the headers look the same across 8 pages. That's a good thing from a design point of view, because you've got consistency. There isn't some, hold on, that one's shorter than the other one, and the fonts are different, and the titles are misaligned. No, actually, that consistency looks professional. But again, it's not something that a person that isn't trained in design would notice.
No.
And these systems out there don't help with that at all.
And like I said, it's the brand alignment as well. That yes, you can use other systems, you can have auto-generated elements, but is it on brand? And it's just not.
No, 100%. And even as an example, I spoke to a client the other day that says, you know, I built a website, I know how to do it, I'm quite aware of it. I can stick a video myself in on the homepage, and kind of immediately that rings alarm bells to me, saying, well, why are you putting a video on your homepage? It's going to reduce your load speed significantly. B, do you actually know how videos work on the web, and do you know how to optimize them, and do you know how Google will punish you for the load speed, and how the user will also be presented with essentially a moving image as soon as they hit your site? They won't know who you are, what you offer, what you do. They just see a moving image.
Yeah, quite.
And you know, the list goes on, but it's that kind of naivety of, I can stick a video on my homepage.
How long did it take this person?
Well, exactly. And then obviously they then come back to me and say, actually, I've tried it and now I need some help to fix it, and it's not looking right, it's not working, it's in the wrong format. And it's again, the conversation is amiss of, why are you putting a video on your homepage? That would be quite a simple first step. What's the point of it? What's the objective? Do you know the risks that you're taking by doing it? Do you understand how to put it on properly? And again, web platforms and web systems, they generally have a way of doing that,
Yep.
but it's quite free. So the client can go in and just add a video and install it and put it up as a massive MP4, for example. Load speed goes down the window.
Yeah.
And they don't know what they're actually putting that video on for, other than, well, it needs to be on our homepage. And I think that's the difference. It's like we've said, it's not the tools. Similarly with AI, it's what you're using them for, and whether you've got the knowledge and awareness of why you'd pick one platform over the other.
A classic case in point really is that yes, you can do these things. Even sites that we've built, we've got clients that can upload videos and upload images and the like.
Yeah.
But we try and educate them. To the point where once the website's built, we then educate them. These are the size images that you need for the website. Maybe even different sized images, and we structure the image content so that it's sized for different media, basically. So for tablet, for mobile, and the like. We also optimize them as well, so they're faster to load.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We have CDNs, content delivery networks. So these images are pulled from as local to the end user as possible.
As long as you're not using Elon's
Starlink. Exactly. It's all this skill and knowledge that we have, and that's why we try and educate our clients once we've built a site. But ongoing, 2 or 3 years down the road, when they potentially, some clients might have new members of staff that come on board that need to update the website. They might not know the conversations that we originally had.
No.
We always, say if the new person comes on board, if they're involved with their website, get in contact with us. We can advise how to upload this, that, and the other, so that your site stays optimized, basically.
Yeah.
Because the second they start, loading their own content, images that are 60 meg and videos that are 1.2 gig or something like that, it's insane. Their site structure will fold, the load times will fold, the searchability will be harmed, all these things. So this is where it's useful using an agency such as us. You can just ask us, get our advice. We'll send you videos of how to optimize your content so that you can update it yourself. Whereas you wouldn't get that from some of these web platforms.
No. Yeah, I think that's a that's a really good point. I didn't touch on sort of mobile speed and optimization is also a valid point. A lot of these tools will try and prioritize that. But like Paul said, if your layout needs to drastically change, or if you're not thinking about that visitor on that device and what they need to find and what they need to do at that point, it's whether you can just rely on the platform to adapt that for you. And again, I would say a lot of these systems out there, you need to know at least some knowledge of what you're trying to communicate, regardless of the platform. And if you've not got a multitude of mixed skills like design, web awareness, coding knowledge, and layout knowledge, then unless you've got all 4 of those things for a website,
optimizing like images and manipulating images. And
well,
things
true,
for the
yeah.
site
So that's true. So images and awareness of images as well, video optimization.
Yeah.
I mean, all those things. But you need that core skill set really to be able to manipulate these tools in a way that's going to be effective for your business. And like Paul said, yes, there'll be layouts, and a lot of them do themes very well. So if you like the look of the theme and you want to run with it, then largely the consistency is going to be there. You'll have quite a nice design style. You can add colors to it. There'll be some consistency there for sure. But again, what it is missing is your awareness of why it's doing some of those things it's doing, and why some of the design decisions are being made, which I think you're just literally beholden to the system to handle that for you. And if your business scales, or if you suddenly start selling 10, 20 more products, or you've got a new division of that website, can you then scale that website without feeling like you're paying a system that you then have to stop paying and move to another system?
Yeah.
Can you scale it equivalently to be the design consistency to be there, and the quality of the content to be maintained essentially?
Yeah.
And from experience, I would argue you can't. That's generally where clients come to us and say, I'm on this system, can you help?
Yeah.
And then we have to be the bearers of bad news and say, well, actually, the dreaded, you need to rebuild your website conversation comes up. But again, we very rarely say that without justification as to have a conversation first, saying like, what's the problem? What are you experiencing issues with?
Yeah.
Where are you trying to take your business? It won't firstly just jump in and say, look, we can't help you at all. We are helping people. There's clients come to us that have been on Shopify that say we're having a real nightmare with it, but we've got a lot of content on it. And, my first port of advice is not, well, let's just get you straight off it and move to WordPress. We've got to be practical and say, well, how much cost is involved in doing that? Can we make Shopify work for you? Do you understand what the problems are?
Yep.
So, we're not web platform averse as such. It's just from a recommendation point of view, it's always got to be the client first.
Yeah. Well, you can build hybrid systems, can't you? So we've built websites.
Yeah, headless systems, basically. Yeah.
So where you got WordPress doing the bulk of the work.
That's right.
Let's say. And then the e-commerce bit is Shopify.
Yeah.
So yeah, the e-commerce bit, selling products.
That Shopify's good at.
Yeah,
you use
really
it
good
for that.
So yeah, the combination of two does work well.
Does work well. Yeah, and Shopify's going more headless now because it's aware that obviously the reliance on apps and separate app developers, it's not a great selling point for it as a system to a new business or a new client. Is saying, we can handle all your needs, we can make your shop look as great as possible. However, anything that isn't built into our fairly limited roster of built-in functionality, you're going to have to seek an app or help from another business, which is going to charge you monthly, maybe crash, need updating, cause problems with customers. So that's been an issue for Shopify for 5-6 years, and they've now started to try and fix that by having a more headless environment, and working with people to try and bring things more into their system. Which I can see an advantage of. Definitely. But again, all the points we've touched on and all the issues still exist, regardless of how efficient and regardless of how much AI they pack into the system. It's still not going to replace the knowledge and awareness of somebody for those skills. And I don't think it ever will.
You're talking about the skills. I think that's a good point. But obviously we've had years of experience using multitude of different systems, not just from the web systems, but also the content creation systems as well, the software that we use to create the elements for a website.
Yeah.
So that's something that, a lot of our clients don't have that knowledge and that skill. So our argument is, how much do you value your time in terms of a monetary value? Because in order for you as a client to learn a system, in which case quite often to build a website there's numerous systems as well, different bits of software, your time to learn those bits of software and systems, that could take you, years, potentially, to get anywhere near the kind of level that we're at, right from the get-go. So, and then once you've learnt those bits of software, then you've got to create all the brand elements, all the brand assets. So this is what we're saying about like using AI systems and things like that. Yes, they're very clever, but are they going to create assets that are aligned to your brand? Most often they're not.
No, not with a lot of work and manipulation.
Especially a lot of the AI images that are currently out. A lot of the image styles look very similar to lots of other image styles as well. So they're not unique to your business.
No, they're not.
So in order to create those assets, so you've learnt the software, so there's all the time that's attributed to that. But then creating all the brand assets, there's a lot of time to do that as well.
Yeah, agreed.
And then inputting that into your website, So that whole sort of learning curve element.
Yeah.
And the amount of time it will take you to create the assets, learn all the software, how much do you value that in terms of monetary value? Because if you itemize that over a period of time, it probably costs you 10 times the amount it would cost for somebody like us to build a website from scratch.
Yeah.
So I think that's where a misconception sometimes comes in. You get marketed to by Shopify and Wix and what's some of the others?
A whole wealth of systems out there, yeah.
Squarespace and all the rest.
Yeah.
And, you kind of miss the point that, okay, that's a great system, but I've got to create all these elements for it. I've got to learn these bits of software in order to create those assets.
Yeah.
It's also a distraction, a diversion from my day-to-day job.
100%, yeah.
So, what in terms of monetary value do I value, doing that myself, as opposed to involving an agency such as ours, where we could, as I say, do it in about 1/10 of the time.
It's the hidden costs, isn't it? That's the thing we get bitten with. It's we're a victim of our own success with that, because we preach marketing and we understand sales techniques, and we explain to clients how to sell products and use sales techniques to sell them. It's a double-edged sword. But then when we see it being done by other systems out there that are basically saying we're skipping over all the actual factual nuances and the bits that we don't really want you to think about, and we're just selling you the bits that we do and that you can do. Again, going back to the electrician analogy, it's like kind of having somebody that understands the whole context of how to wire a house or how to do electrics, and then somebody that's never done electrics in their life, but they've seen an advert for a tool that basically says it can just come in and scan your house and it will just sort your electrics out. Well, to them that sounds perfect. They need
Well, you need that.
I need that, yeah, because my electrics are kind of shot. But yeah, that would be great actually if they did come up with that. But that, to that person that knows no different, that sounds like the perfect solution for them. But an electrician will come in and go, well, hold on a minute. No, there's a lot of issues here. Your wall's not quite right for that to work like that. That's not plumbed with that. We can't put that into that circuit board. The fuse box needs to be redone for this. It won't take that voltage. That person would come in and they'd know a lot of issues and save that person probably a lot of time in the long run from just running with that solution and then experiencing all the issues with it. And I think that's the analogy I'd use for some of the web systems. It's seeing the marketing out there and seeing why they're selling them, but it's all the bits that they're not telling you, and all the bits that you only experience when you've done them and you've used them. And I suppose it sounds a bit like I'm a kind of fanboy of WordPress in that I've not really given any negatives either of WordPress. So I'd be quite transparent and say obviously there are some risks with WordPress that we make absolute priority to avoid. But if you were to, go on a very bad hosting system with WordPress, because that's something that you don't have to worry about with the web systems, then you could lose your website, it could get hacked, it could get taken down. These days, hosting is probably a much higher tier than it ever was before. But with us, we would obviously ensure all those things were comparable to any web system out there. Hosting would be top tier, it would be UK based, it would be 100% green, it would be everything that we can do to ensure that the backups are there, like Paul said, the security's there, firewalls are there. The WordPress system would be as, if not more secure than any of the platforms out there, and we would know where your data and your content is because it would be on a server that we've paid for, which again is another minor thing. But some of these American-based platforms with our GDPR regs, it's where your data's sat, where your client's data's sat, where their credit card information resides. There's a lot of data on there and on these systems that people don't even think about until something happens or a breach happens. Then they start worrying, thinking, actually, where is that sat? And I think that's another real important thing to bear in mind. Is if you've got a business where GDPR is absolutely paramount and you're based in the UK, then it's really important you know where your client's data resides, where this system's holding that data. And like I say, there's a multitude of these really popular systems that aren't UK based, so they don't really have UK GDPR as the top of their priority.
So if they're based, say, in the States, will the site be slower, do you think?
Generally these days, like you touched on, CDNs are prime, and they'll have servers in this country.
CDN really just delivers images, doesn't it?
It's all content. So it will deliver it will cache what's referred to as caching, which is basically a locally stored version of. So if you imagine a web browser and you're refreshing a website 20 times, you don't want to load the website 20 times from that server. It's inefficient. It's damaging to the environment. Your internet's having to download things repetitively. So way back when the system of caching came in to basically say, let's store a version of a lot of the content on this site. So when you refresh it the next 19 times, we're only loading 10% of this content that may have changed. It's an efficient way of. So obviously
unless you're using Starlink.
Unless you're using Starlink, as we found recently, which is slightly interesting. I'm not sure. Might need to have a word with Elon about that. Drop him an email.
Old Trump's mate.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm not sure what they're doing with that one. The $2,000 a month is probably why it's so inefficient, isn't it?
Yeah, maybe.
So there's that element of caching, so that essentially you're saving that repeated loading
Yes.
process.
Yep.
So a CDN is a network, so they're global, but there'll be ones around the UK that companies tap into. They store data on them, so that your local one, the one closest to you, will just serve that information to you without you having to reload it again and again. That's generally the way that they would get around the speed issues. Or a lot of these businesses are so big now, they'll have
Offices,
infrastructures in this country around. So I wouldn't have said that's a major concern, is the loading, but it is a concern where the data's stored. And if say Shopify is based in the US, so they've got servers in the US that they're borrowing to store your customers' data on, it's just knowing where your customers' data resides, because the laws will be different about if it got leaked, or if somebody needs to access it, if it's stored in a different country, regardless of where
that's a good point.
where your business is. So you need to just be aware of that. And then another negative, like we said about with Shopify with WordPress, is just plugins. So in order to get functionality, a lot of people go to plugins in WordPress. And obviously, if you've got a lot of them in there as a platform, it becomes bloated. It becomes very fragile, because one could conflict with another. And as a client, that we've experienced ourselves, as a client, you're very tendent to just add loads of plugins on to avoid contacting an agency. Without knowing the risks of the fact they're all made by different people. They've all got their own problems. If they're not updated, there can be a vulnerability to your website.
And quite often they're in different countries as well.
Again, different countries.
Resolve issues, as we've experienced, the clients trying to resolve issues.
And their overseas support,
Exactly. So there's a time delay, and sometimes they don't get back to you for weeks on end.
Exactly. So it's keeping your plugins to a minimum, which we do as an agency, and are continuing to do. 2025, 2026, we're looking to try and create WordPress sites that are using an absolute minimum amount of plugins that we know and trust, and that we can update almost with our eyes shut and not worried that they're going to crash or break sites. Because at the moment, a lot of the issues you get are with these alien plugins that are just, they serve a real niche for a client, and some of them are great. Off the top of my head, like a booking reservation plugin that does seating plans and bookings. It's perfect for what the client needs, but it's a new plugin, a new system, and if it does have a problem, it could take the whole website down.
I say the plugin is reliant on how well it's supported by the
100%.
Developers that created it.
Exactly.
And if it's a one-man band and he decides that actually I'm not going to support this plugin anymore, I'm going to go and work in a restaurant.
100%.
Then what's happened to your plugin?
Plugins
Yes, it'll work for a while, but as soon as it falls over, that's it.
Yeah. Plugins are the absolute bugbear of WordPress, and I think why people lose faith in it and why people don't like it is because their site breaks or it crashes, or people say it's very easy to hack WordPress. 99% of the time, it's because the plugin has allowed that person to get into your site. So if you do your due diligence on the plugins, you should be fine with it, really. Which we do, but sometimes clients come to us and you can see they've had an agency that's used a lot of messy ones. They've tried it themselves. They've used a lot of interesting ones that I wouldn't trust. And it's just about vetting them. Again, it's like having a kind of seeing it almost like a family of security and safety. And if there's somebody that's foreign in there that you don't recognize, that you don't trust or know, and you know nothing about, then that's obviously an area of weakness that could inject into your site and create a problem.
But so I think goes with experience, though, doesn't it? I mean, we've tried and tested so many plugins over the years that we know
a lot of them.
Which ones work really well and the others that we just won't
use. And like I say, moving forward, our objective is to use systems, and we're actually working with a system for WordPress to basically reduce as many plugins as we can and just keep things working as seamlessly and efficiently as possible for the client. So I think it was worth me mentioning that, because obviously we've bigged WordPress up quite a lot, but I've not touched on the negatives. And there's always negatives to every system, but the way that we would utilize WordPress would cut them to a minimum.
Yeah, fair enough. So talking about like the web platforms, I mean, we touched on both platforms earlier, like Shopify and WooCommerce.
Yeah, we did.
WooCommerce being the sort of e-commerce sort of element for WordPress. Yeah. So what are the main differences between Shopify and WooCommerce?
Well, very clearly at the front is that WooCommerce doesn't charge you as a platform fee, which is something they've stuck by. Automatic now own and maintain WooCommerce, which is the same guys that have WordPress. So there's that synergy between those two, and I think the mindset is still very much open source. We want to allow people to build things. The negative side with open source is obviously the funding. the funding that Shopify have is going to be far exceeding the funding that an open source system would have. So the development, the progress, the updates, features that Shopify can offer or BigCommerce could offer will be far superior to a system like WooCommerce, where you're waiting years and years for something to happen. Having said that, it's been around for years and years, so it is still a very capable system. And there's a lot of external companies that partner with WooCommerce that build extensions for it that are very well trusted, tested by WooCommerce, automatic. So there's a lot of official extensions for WooCommerce which give it a lot of capability. So it's just a very different way of going about it. So Shopify would, as I say, you're buying a platform, you're renting it. If you left, you'd still have to move all that content away. You'd have a problem. WordPress, you're benefiting from the fact it can do your main website as well as your shop. And you're bolting WooCommerce on, which is bringing most of the functionality in that Shopify would have. It's just not quite as focused as Shopify. It's not quite as seamless in terms of checkouts. As I say, updates, kind of syncing with apps like Shop2 and Shop Apps and DPD, things like that. You can immediately notice when a website's using Shopify on the less than $2,000 tier, because every checkout looks the same, the interface looks the same, the headers generally look quite similar. Almost now I can spot a Shopify site within about 10 seconds of being on it, before I've even looked, and I'm nearly always right about it. But there's certain elements there that people don't want to change. It works. It's efficient.
It does work.
Yeah,
it's quite a slick platform, to be fair.
Exactly. So I think it's finding if it's right for you. But the main difference is that obviously out of the box, WooCommerce is very flexible. You can do whatever you want with the code. You're not having to rent a platform, essentially.
That's the key word, actually, renting.
You
are renting it.
You are renting it. You never own it, and it's not any good to you if the company folded, or I'm not saying they would. They're very financially stable, but if they did, then that whole system is useless because it's built around their software.
You've got no e-commerce website.
You've got nothing. No. And like we said, we touched on it in a previous podcast, but we did have it. There was an issue with Webflow where they were giving too much to the clients on certain tiers, and they had to change the parameters and the cost of existing customers, which is obviously going to really annoy people because they've been loyal to them and they've had a certain amount of allowance to date. Suddenly they change it. And they can't help that because that's the way their infrastructure was set up and the volume scaled, and they had to do something.
They ramped the cost up a lot though.
The cost went up a decent amount, but they also lowered the usage tier. So not only did they up the cost, but they lowered the usage tier, which really upset people. I think they did kind of manage to smooth it out a little bit, but in the first interim, obviously it's just a prime example where if a company like that scales and they're on a pricing model, unless the pricing model foresees that scaling, there's no way that you can avoid it. They've got to keep the company running, so they either charge the clients to accommodate their fees, or they lose all the clients and they can't pay the fees anyway. So
essentially they just turn around and say, well, we've needed to scale, so you need to pay X more, or lose your site.
Exactly,
basically.
Or we lower your tiers, which is going to upset people, because that means people that have sites that are already over those tiers can no longer run the site without paying the fee. So it did really upset people, and obviously that's not a massively common occurrence, but it still could occur all the time. And it's something to consider in how big you want your site to scale. But I think it's what we touched on. It's scalability. It's not where your business is at right now. You might have 10 products and you want to set up a Shopify site. It's very appealing. How long is that site going to last for you? And what about if you want to add more products and add more functionality? And how's that going to work?
The next thing, so like WordPress against like page builders, so pros and cons of that.
So touched on
a brief
sort of
overview.
We touched on Elementor earlier, which I would avoid because of the code quality of it, the clunkiness, and generally if you're trained in web, you work on what's called a class first work system. So in web design, classes are used to create styles and elements and design your whole site. Basically what a lot of the page builders do is try and replace that methodology and basically allow people, like we spoke about earlier, really touching on the same subject, but how people that don't really know what they're trying to achieve, it gives them the ability to try and design a website, create a website. But ultimately, this code was designed for a reason, and web designers and web coders know the code for a reason. It's a language, and when there's a tool out there that's trying to go against the language and say, we got a better way of doing it, actually, you don't need classes, then there's only going to be a matter of time before that hits a wall and think, right, why were classes around before then, and why do people do things like that before? And that's generally where a lot of these page builders come in, is they try and avoid all the rules, all the knowledge, all the regulations you need to know to be a web designer or developer. And like we spoke about earlier, you then end up neglecting design, you end up neglecting flow, copywriting, all the principles of what makes the site good and work and effective, in replacement for a tool that says you can build your own site, here's a page builder. And I think that's the alarm bell to be wary of. We do use page builders for our site. For a lot of clients, we vary them, we try and be adaptable. If they've got one already and they come to us, we'll use it if their budget doesn't support a complete redesign. But out of the box, we would look to try and use a class first framework. So it would be something like Bricks is a really good one. So everything that Bricks does is with a coder's mind. So it's like, what should a coder do? What would a web designer do here? What would a web developer do? And try and help somebody to do that. But the caveat to that is obviously someone that's never done web design or web development that sees Bricks is going to think, oh, hold on, that scares me a bit. I don't know how to use that because I don't know any of the principles. I mean, it's again a bit like Webflow. It's done a very good job of educating people, and it's made it very easy and proven why classes are the way to go. But all I would say on WordPress and page builders is just be careful the purpose of why you're using them. And a bit like we said with Shopify, if the page builder is trying to go against the principles of web design and web development, then when you turn it off, what you're left with is just jargon. Your website just is basically a bunch of letters, code, numbers that's not transferable to anything because they've made their own way of doing it. Whereas again, a system like Bricks, yes, you do need Bricks active to see the layout, but when it is active, the layout that you see is what you would see if you coded it yourself, and that's the difference.
But isn't it like also the amount of code that some of these page builders bring in? Like, because we know
bloating big time.
Elementor and
Divi
is a classic. That the amount of code that it brings in right from the get-go,
ridiculous amount of code,
like really makes your website code heavy. Really,
it makes the page twice as big as it needs to be.
So and I guess by it being bigger in terms of code, then it makes it slower.
Slower, harder to update. Like I spoke about earlier with the analogy of the Word document, clean Word document, messy Word document. It's just everything is not reflective of what you expect. Its predictability is lower as well. You make a change in the system and you look at it on the website or the front end, it looks different. And you think, why is it different? And you've got to go and work it out. You've got to think, what's this page builder done to my change to make it different? It's not a case of, actually, I made that change there and I'm now going to see it there and it looks how I expected it to look. That's the difference, I think, with the page builders is, you're taking a risk and you're trying to fill a gap that maybe if it's a big gap of knowledge, it shouldn't be filled. And I think that's the problem with so many clients that come to us and they've had a go with some of these page builders. And it's, again, a horrible conversation we have to have with sort of saying, well, actually, we can't save this because you've gone so far down the road with it in this system that we can't recover it. It's just got to be rebuilt.
Well, that's it. I mean, sometimes we have clients that come to us and say, can you, add additional functionality? Can you do X, Y, Z with this current website using even, Elementor or whatever? And sometimes for us to redo things would take far longer than it would for us to build the website again from scratch.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but we'll obviously advise a client and, work out a best way forward and whether we can do an interim. But generally, that's why we always try and advise clients right from the get-go that, come to us, we'll advise you, not just for the quick short-term fix.
No.
I need a website. It's, well, where do you need to take it? In 1 year, 3 years, 5 years?
That's it. That's 100% it. And I think it's having that conversation first and not, I hear myself saying it and I don't want to be that person that immediately says, oh, you need to rebuild your site. But
you need to rebuild your site.
Yeah, because we hear it from agencies and they don't have that conversation beforehand with the client. They don't say why you need to rebuild your site. They literally just see, oh, you've used a system we don't work with and we need to rebuild it. But we're not coming at it from that angle. We're coming at it much more from an angle of, is that system sufficient to grow your business? Can you scale your website with it? Can we update it efficiently? I think that's where we come at with everything.
You touched on it earlier, SEO.
And SEO is a huge factor.
If it's not being found by search engines,
it's just dead in the water.
Exactly. But like you said, I mean earlier, that some clients, may not be bothered, but why would you not be bothered about having your website found?
You're right.
For a lot of businesses, I mean, that is their
not worried about
their
SEO.
shop front.
Yeah.
Without that,
Yeah.
then people don't even know that they exist.
Yeah, exactly that. That's the acronym I've used a couple of clients lately, and they've said, I'm not really worried about SEO. And it's kind of like saying, I want to set a shop up in the street, but I'm quite happy to just put a blind up in front of it or paint it black and just expect people to wander and come in and know what we do because they can see it through the window. Yeah, but why not have it actually clear? And why not try and get more people in because it's only going to be a good thing. But there's a lot of clients that believe that we don't need SEO. It's not important. But like, we work closely with a dedicated SEO consultancy, and they will say, so many times actually informational content that you can put out there is so advantageous because it's not all about telling people what you're selling and what you're doing. It's about helping people.
Yes, how you can help.
And sharing knowledge. And if that business is saying, I don't want to do SEO, we don't need it. Actually, no, but giving back information about what you do, talking about topics, talking about important global topics, news topics, that's showing that you care and that you're relevant in those areas. And I think if you're just not considering it.
Or doing podcasts.
Yeah.
Or pubcasts, I should say.
Everyone's doing a podcast, but not everyone's doing a podcast.
Exactly that.
So I think that is it. And I accept that really popular, busy businesses maybe don't need SEO because they are popular and they are busy, but they still would benefit from it.
Oh, of course.
I think that's the key thing.
Yeah.
And as you say, the web platform in topic of this podcast, the web platforms with SEO, they try and help you. But again, if you don't know what SEO is, you don't know then there's going to be a limitation to what they allow you to do because they're not going to want to say, well, you just run away and do what you like because suddenly you won't know what the hell you're doing. There's a limitation to web platforms. There'd be very little limitation to WordPress because you can code it however you want.
So in a few sentences, if you had to sum up our conversation today, the pros and cons of different web platforms, how would you summarize it?
I'd probably say, essentially, like we said, put the priority as what your business needs. So have a conversation first. We always have a discovery phase with everything we do now because we want to have, that relationship and conversation with the client and find out where their head's at, what they're trying to do, what their business needs. So following that conversation, it should be quite transparent. If you've got something that's unique, you've got something that's sellable, you've got a vision, that's already been discussed. So it's very clear. Obviously, if you haven't and you don't really know what your business is trying to do or your product's trying to do, that does become very difficult to then try and sell because we need that leverage to know, we're really confident this person has got an idea here or they've got a business that they want to push forward or so that helps us then guide and say, right, in order to do that, we recommend this strategy first, this phase of the website, we move on to phase 2, phase 3, we scale that website. And what we wouldn't do is start by saying, right, what web platforms are out there or what systems are out there that could help to do what you need them to do, because I think that's the complete wrong way of looking at it. They are just tools that can facilitate certain things, and I think as a professional agency our priority is making sure that we do things as best as possible. And if a tool that's out there can do that and it can replace what we would do and it's at the quality we produce it, then absolutely no problem at all using it. But where we would have a problem is if we can see a limitation or as a cost there, we would want to warn the client and make sure they're really clear that, this might work for you for a year, but in 2-3 years, you're going to have to be paying a lot more money. The practicality of it's going to sort of peter off versus this system, where we could see it scaling and see it being more fluid. So I think, that is where we've come at it from an agency. But as a consumer looking at these platforms, if you felt, you wanted to use one for your website or for your business, I would say, again, think about the objectives first, have that conversation first about what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do, and then see which one fits.
Well, thanks, guys. And that concludes our episode on the pros and cons of different web platforms. So,
thanks, guys.
Look forward to another episode coming soon.
See you soon. Cheers.
Cheers.